the TikTok ban is happening. It's going to go away, blah, blah, blah. Tell your congressman not to do this. And people posting videos about how stupid it is that Congress is finally doing something. And instead of healthcare or housing or immigration, it's TikTok. Communism or socialism is when government does stuff. And government's doing stuff. So I'm like, hang on, I don't like it when government does stuff.
Average American sees this and goes, this is crazy. And they know that their kids may be on TikTok and watching this stuff. And they're like, how is this influencing my kids? What are this stuff doing?
China has the biggest army of hackers in the world. And every so often you hear, oh, massive breach at JP Morgan Chase or whatever. And yeah, all your information was stolen. And like, who do you think's stealing that? It's China.
There are arguments that would say TikTok, because it's not controlled by American entities, happens to actually be more free, which is an interesting concept.
Hello, and welcome to the Pop Culture Contrarian podcast with Thomas, Sterling, and Andrew.
Hello. Hey there, guys.
Our topic today is the TikTok bill in Congress that might ban it. And Andrew, will you kind of explain what's going on with that?
All right. So first in a long time, kind of a bipartisan bill, which may be a good thing, maybe a terrifying thing, depending on your opinion.
Right. How much you trust Congress.
Indeed. But essentially, it is a House bill that has passed that is being called the TikTok ban bill. And I think we're going to try and clarify that it's not really a ban, but we'll dig into that. You can read, Sterling, the actual name of the bill.
Yeah. So the bill is HR 7521, or if you want an actual name with words, Protecting Americans from Foreign Adversary Controlled Applications Act.
Right.
And so this rolls off the tongue.
Right.
Yes, indeed.
Easy to remember.
And so the idea is more or less the FBI, the director of FBI has said TikTok, run by the parent company ByteDance, is data mining or collecting Americans' data and is an extreme national threat to security. And so we need to do something about it. And more or less the bill is regulating TikTok. And we can get into exactly how that is supposed to work.
Yeah. So I'll ask you, the bill might ban TikTok, right? Like that is one of the options. What's the other?
The other option is to be divested from Chinese interest and then acquired, essentially a forced sale to an American company, and control of that being in American hands, and theoretically all Chinese spyware scrubbed from the platform. No more links to Beijing.
Okay.
And American control.
Right. So Thomas, can you explain why, when we look at Facebook and Amazon and stuff, why would we want TikTok to be American controlled?
I think the simple answer, not that it's simple to force this, but Facebook, X, everything, they're American entities, American owned, and therefore theoretically answerable to Congress. So
that mechanism exists at the very least.
And they have to follow the laws of the land, etc. And now, from what I understand, TikTok claims that it's been following the law.
Yeah, well, everyone claims that.
Yeah, but it apparently our spy agencies are saying not so fast.
Yeah.
So if it was American owned, then the pressure of American law could be brought to bear against TikTok.
Yeah,
is the distinction there.
Yeah.
And China isn't just having a free spyware in everybody's pocket.
Yeah. So that's kind of what's actually happening. The kind of reason this is pop cultural is TikTok is very much a pop culture phenomenon, but also the people who use TikTok, and as the resident sufferer of TikTok usage here at this table.
Sean.
Is it turning your brain into mush?
My brain's been mush for years. You know that. You've been watching me. The users of TikTok are being told that it's just a TikTok ban. There's not really much nuance in the discussion on TikTok. It's just the TikTok ban is happening. It's going to go away, blah, blah, blah. Tell your congressman not to do this. And people posting videos about how stupid it is that Congress is finally doing something. And instead of healthcare or housing or immigration, it's TikTok. And I can kind of relate somewhat to that attitude. This is the focus right now with all the things going on in our country. But, the way Congress works, when you can do something, you do it. It doesn't really matter if there's other things you should be doing. This is the thing that you have the option to tackle right now. So tackle it.
And you could make the argument theoretically that one of the primary roles of our government is the protection of the citizenry from foreign entities that would wish to do us harm.
Yeah.
China would be one of those. And so, yeah, maybe it's not doing a bunch of Congress, that is not doing a bunch of other things that we'd like to see them do. But whenever they can get together and kind of do something that's for the safety and interest of Americans from foreign aggressors, generally we should be at least understanding of that and even somewhat supportive of it if it makes sense. And I think that there's elements of this that definitely make sense.
Yeah. So that was kind of my fear before I actually did some research, found the actual bill, read the content of the bill. But before I read the bill, I was worried that, well, you're saying that TikTok's an adversary and therefore you can make them sell. Are you going to be able to, with this bill, say that X or Twitter is an adversary and make them sell and make Elon sell it? And so that kind of loophole, Trojan horse kind of thing is what I was primarily worried about. And that's what a lot of people on TikTok are worried about because, again, the people on TikTok do not have the actual facts.
Yeah.
That's very clear from the discussion.
And, the algorithm is pushing that to the top of the page, which I find very interesting.
Yeah, the algorithm is, I think, more of an issue with TikTok than the fact it is an issue that TikTok is sending our data to China, who then can use it for whatever nefarious means they can come up with. But I just see there's so many ways they collect our data and send it to companies that I think are using it for nefarious means that doesn't bother me tremendously. But the algorithm does manipulate your view of the world for sure, and that's, I think, more of an issue.
Yeah.
Well, and obviously the entity that's pushing the algorithm to get TikTokers to contact our congressman and say, no, don't ban TikTok. Well, where do we think that those marching orders are coming from?
Yeah. They're coming from Beijing.
Yeah. Winnie the Pooh.
Yeah. Winnie the Pooh or Winnie Jinping, Xi Jinping. Yeah. That would have been forgotten if he hadn't raised a fuss about being compared to Winnie the Pooh.
He should have just grinned and smiled and laughed along.
Xi pooping.
So that's kind of the fear, is that the information from my phone sitting in my pocket right now is being sent to Xi Jinping to be used against us. I don't know how they could use it, but it seems reasonable to close that loophole if that's what the bill actually does.
Yeah. I think they can use it to target cohorts of the populace to get results from a cultural level.
Right. Yeah. If nothing else, getting people to contact their congressman when they want.
Or even reminding people to vote for certain people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or, even more, as the term politics is downstream from culture.
Yeah.
Move the culture in the directions of degeneracy.
Yeah. So I kind of have, I think, we've come more into agreement as we've done some research, but a more libertarian view on things like this generally, I think, than you two guys. Mm-hmm. Not that you're not libertarian on lots of stuff, but to me, there's the famous quote that's been made fun of, but I think it's a funny and a good quote, that communism or socialism is when government does stuff, and government's doing stuff. So I'm like, hang on, I don't like it when government does stuff. But also that I like I said, I was worried that they were going to put some loophole in here to basically kind of pull a Patriot Act all over again and let them spy on or manipulate and force to sell anybody they wanted. So what I did is I researched the bill. I pulled it up. I found it, and I have it here. I'm going to read a few sections real quick. So,
and it's not that long, actually.
No, it's like 3 pages. It's not one of those 10,000 page bills that no one can read. So it's specifically talking about forcing. It mentions TikTok and ByteDance by name, forcing them to sell to an American, and it says applicability. So these rules apply in the case of an application that satisfies the definition of a foreign adversary-controlled application pursuant to subsection G3A. So you go to G3A, if you can find it. What you find is that it specifically refers to covered companies from covered nations, which is, what does that mean? Covered companies and covered nations refers to just 4 nations, from what I could find. It only refers to these 4 nations. The Democratic Republic of Korea.
North Korea.
North Korea. So, yeah. They're an adversary. I'm fine with that. Iran, they're an adversary. I'm fine with that. China, okay, I'm fine with that. And Russia. It's just those 4 nations, And as far as I can tell, this bill can't be used on any company owned by anyone anywhere that's not from those 4 nations. So
yeah, we're not lawyers, but that's what it seems to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the clear reading of the law, at least.
Yeah. The obvious reading says what I just said.
Yeah.
So that settled a lot of my fears about this because I'd heard from people saying they were going to ban X or Rumble or whatever, and I really don't see how they could pull that off.
Rumble because Canada.
Yeah, the servers are up in Canada.
Those Canadians.
Right.
Our benevolent tyrant neighbors in
Yeah.
the north.
That's what they're becoming.
Well, for sure. They're, going to lock you up in prison forever for saying things now.
Yeah. Hate crime, life sentences
Well,
for social media.
Only if you advocate genocide.
Right.
Okay.
And if you go to the doctor because you're feeling depressed and you wait 6 months and you get to the doctor says, have you considered offing yourself? I said that version instead of the other version.
Is that included in that law?
No, it's a separate law. I'm just saying
okay.
These people are not people to imitate. But anyhow, that was just a tangent. So TikTok.
Yes.
So this is particularly talking about the fact that data is being sent to China, but that's not, I don't feel like, why most people have an issue with TikTok, right? What do y'all think is like the main issue with TikTok in our culture today? What do you think people talk about as the bad part of TikTok?
I think mainly it is the recommendations in the algorithm that tend to basically cause mental illness in young people.
Yeah.
More or less.
Or derangement. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cultural degeneracy, I think, is the fear.
Yeah. So the argument has been made that there's evidence that the Chinese version of this promotes high academic achievement, neighborliness, good standing with your family, with your neighbors, all good things. And then essentially TikTok tends to push stuff like booty dances and all manner of degeneracy and just cultural liberal ideas like that are against the nucleus of the family and the strength of the nation.
Yeah.
And additionally, they tend to create echo chambers really bad. Like
echo chambers for sure. So as someone who uses it, I was surprised because that's kind of what I thought when I first downloaded it. I was bored and somewhere where I wasn't going to have anything else to do. So I was like, I'll check out TikTok. And it very quickly, it is addictive, but what else is addictive is sending and receiving text messages. So, but as I looked into it, I found you can really tailor what kind of videos you're going to get shown pretty well. There will still be times when TikTok's just like, you're going to see a bunch of this video now because we say so. But you can, if you don't want to see the booty dances, then you very easily have the option of saying not interested in this video, making sure they don't keep showing up. And it's responsive. So the things you engage with are the things that are more likely to keep showing up. So like I'm following a lot of people who talk about the U.S. military, sometimes from humorous perspectives, sometimes, we just developed or we just got this new press release on the new stealth bomber the U.S. is building. And here's what we know. Here's what we don't know. And all sorts of stuff like that. So you can learn really cool, interesting stuff. And you can also watch videos of people wandering around in the Everglades, catching animals and telling you all about them. So there's, I think, a lot of value there where you're seeing firsthand accounts and firsthand speech from people all over the world, which is not something I expected from the way TikTok is discussed.
Yeah.
Do you think it's a freer platform right now for speech than, at least in the U.S., than are the other big tech platforms?
Yeah, that's a item of devil's advocate that I've heard.
Yeah.
There are arguments that would say TikTok, because it's not controlled by American entities, happens to actually be more free, which is an interesting concept.
Yeah, I would guess that there's probably less DEI people doing the censoring on TikTok than on Facebook or on Instagram or stuff like that. So those concerns aren't the ones that are in the minds of the people doing the censoring. It does seem like TikTok does a pretty good job of mostly just censoring things like inappropriate, sexually revealing stuff or stuff like that. There's also overly violent stuff. There's also something where TikTok users very quickly learned there's words you just can't use. Mm-hmm. And if we want our podcast to be promoted everywhere, there's words we can't use here either. But it's things like instead of saying that someone has passed away, but the one word you might use instead, you say unalive. He unalived himself.
Yeah.
And so lots of language like that, which feels very 1948, 1984.
Yeah.
You have to speak in a lot of euphemisms.
Yeah. And speak around the point. Yeah. But there were very quickly some easy workarounds that everyone learned.
So it's still like what I'm wondering is going back to our big beef, which has been with Facebook because of all the shadow banning that we received under them and everything. And, they do put a target on conservatives and, try to limit their reach effectively on their platform. It didn't used to be that way with a lot of these platforms. They were very much free speech places.
Yeah.
And
that's why we joined in the early days.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering if the same pattern might not be at play with TikTok, where keep it as free and open early on until you get everyone on it and kind of like addicted to it. And then you start narrowing the parameters of accepted speech and you start controlling people that way, which is effectively what has happened, I would argue, with Facebook and these other big tech companies is,
and
like,
I would think,
you were pointing out just then, the words that we're using, like, undeaded himself or unalived himself. I mean, that's ridiculous talk.
Yeah.
And yet we have to, we do it because we say, well, if we use a certain word, it will get screened by it'll be caught up in the,
it'll be like community guidelines violation.
Yeah.
Right.
It'll be automatically caught.
Yeah. It'll be caught by, it's not even individuals who are listening to them. It's what, algorithms or something that have these specific words that are like no words.
Yeah.
And so it's actually inadvertently, maybe it's not even inadvertently, but it's controlling how we talk.
Yeah. I would say, in response to your original question, that the censorship is different on TikTok versus it's not necessarily better or worse, but it's definitely different. So like on Facebook, I don't think there's anything about posting images of guns, but on TikTok, you cannot show a gun in your video or that'll get banned.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
But then on Facebook, like if you're a conservative, and as we've experienced at the Patriot Post, if you have a conservative page, they will limit your reach so that no one sees what you've posted. Mm-hmm. I don't think that happens so much on TikTok if you're a conservative. I think you get a normal amount of reach. They definitely tweak things and say this video is going to be shown and this one won't, but they do that to everybody, even if they're just doing booty dances, basically.
Okay. What do you mean by this one will and this one won't be shown?
There just does not seem to be tons of rhyme or reason to which videos a content producer makes will go viral and which ones won't. It's just kind of
random.
There was room in the algorithm today for this kind of video, and the next day there wasn't, so it didn't.
That's
show
interesting
up on
because
feed.
To me that tells me it's almost like training the populace or the user base to basically accept this random like rule system where there's not a parameter which they can identify to know I'm producing things that will be okay. I'm not producing things that will be okay.
Yeah.
So
well,
you don't have the expectation.
It's not. You know if you've done something wrong because they'll ban the video, they'll take it down, or they'll tell you can't show that.
Right.
But there is that element of they're kind of training you to just be used to confusion.
Yes.
Because you'll have two videos that don't break any rules. Right. And there's no political messaging. It's just, you're doing the floss dance in one and you're doing the robot dance in another, and the robot dance goes viral and the floss dance doesn't, and you have no idea why.
Yeah.
So there's that aspect of it, but it does not, at least as far as you can tell, because the way TikTok works, you can't search things like you can on Facebook or Twitter, or you can't very well. That's not really the way you engage with the platform.
You're really at the mercy of the algorithm.
Right. You have a For You page and you have a following page. So following is just people you follow.
So like Twitter.
So
For You is we think you're interested.
Yeah.
So it actually is more algorithmic than like your Facebook experience or X experience or something.
Oh, for sure. It's absolutely the most in-your-face algorithm you're going to experience in social media.
Interesting. Okay.
Where you will get a feel for kind of what the algorithm does, but you can't. It's hard to put into words.
Okay. And it's hard to even manipulate it?
Yes, it is hard to manipulate it. There's sometimes you can, figure out something you can do, and people will post, hey, if you do this, it'll go viral pretty much no matter what. And then they'll change it, and that one doesn't work anymore.
Interesting.
So do you think that this bill, as it's written, is a good method of addressing the problem, or should there be a ban?
I would say this bill, as it's written, I don't have a problem with. Whether it's a good method of addressing the problem, I guess not, because I don't necessarily think
Like
China spying on me is the big problem. I think the problem is all of your devices spy on you for somebody.
Yeah.
That's my problem.
Yeah.
I'm okay with us keeping China from spying on me. That's good. I'd like to also keep Amazon and Google and all those companies from spying on me too, though.
Yeah.
Well, as you've described how this app works or this platform works, it opens up in my mind initially ulterior motives for why the U.S. would not want China having it. I mean, the obvious one is it's evidently one of the more manipulative platforms out there.
Certainly.
User manipulating the user.
Sure.
Put it that way.
And ultimately the culture.
So if they gain access to this, if a U.S. entity gains access to this, then that U.S. entity has the same power to manipulate rather than that foreign company or foreign.
Well, exactly. That's kind of part of the fear as well. It's like, you want it to sell to an American.
Right.
Well, I guess I trust Americans more, but it's kind of like, would you rather, die in a war or die in your home? I guess I'd rather die in my home because I get to live my normal life right up until I die. But there's not much to choose between the two.
There are plenty of European entities that refuse to route internet traffic through American servers because of how we treat data.
Interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting.
I'm just seeing this as, in one sense, if we end up with TikTok, if a U.S. entity ends up owning TikTok, it's going to be within the larger entity of what we've termed big tech.
Yeah.
And we've already seen through the Twitter files and other reporting how the U.S. government has been in bed with big tech for censoring certain data or certain viewpoints, put it that way. And this would be just another tool that maybe not so much for use of censorship, but can you imagine if the U.S. government said, hey, we want to get more people on board with this program or this
You
agenda.
could very easily do that with TikTok. So that's part of why, at least with China, I know the kinds of things they're going to be wanting me to do. At least I suspect I know, and it's lose faith in America, unalive yourself kind of stuff.
Yeah.
With an American, I wouldn't be as sure what they were manipulating me towards or away from. And I find this might just be that I'm used to China running TikTok. It could just be that. But I find the idea of a country who's kind of openly an adversary manipulating me better than someone who claims to be my brother American.
Yeah. Well, at least for someone like you who has a perspective of being like paying attention.
Yeah.
As opposed to someone else who's not really thinking about this.
Yeah, if you gave Hillary Clinton control of TikTok, I think Democrats would win the next 20 elections.
Yeah. And then, of course, there's the additional question of, should American powers, whoever that may be, private sector, whatever, take control. Do all of the back end backdoors actually get erased? Because the claim is, yes, we can do that, but is that really possible? Yeah.
I mean, even if you got rid of the backdoors they have now, surely they have all the code.
Yeah,
and they're going to know how to build a new one.
They have the original code, which already gives them the advantage of, I know that China has the world's largest army of hackers in the world.
Yeah.
So it's not like they're not already actively engaged in trying to infiltrate all of our systems anyway. And here's one that they've written, effectively, or they've owned it long enough to know it. And even though it gets taken over by a U.S. company, I'm sure there's going to be obviously changes made to the software to try to prevent.
Well, it's data storage that would change, presumably.
I guess it's primarily data storage, and maybe that's mostly it. But couldn't there be backdoors to allow them into that data storage to suck it up? Yeah,
none of us are tech enough guys to know for sure, but I would have to say yes. I would assume.
I would think so.
Yeah. And that's the other thing is that, as you said, China has the biggest army of hackers in the world. And every so often you hear, massive breach at JP Morgan Chase or whatever. Mm-hmm. And all your information was stolen. And like, who do you think's stealing that? It's China. So, my phone has barometers in it. It has accelerometers in it. It has a way to check my blood pressure. So like it knows not only what the air pressure in the room I'm in, it knows when it's raining on me. It knows where I walk around. It knows who I talk to. It knows where I drive to. And, Google Maps used to, I don't know if they still do, they used to give you like a month in review. Here's all the places you went. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, great.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you have that information.
Yeah.
So all China has to do is have a backdoor into Google, which I would think they already have, to have all the information on me they could possibly want. That's part of why I see this as kind of like, it's kind of sleight of hand by Congress to make them make the people think they're doing something to protect your data when I'm not sure they actually are.
More of a political question. I think it's fascinating. Obviously Biden has said if the Senate brings this to his desk, he's going to sign it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Trump is now utilizing this as a campaign point, campaign issue. And it is from the opposite position of where he was as president.
Yeah, he's saying don't support the bill.
Right.
Yeah.
And he initially supported an all-out ban on TikTok.
Right. And he had an executive order that Biden overruled.
Yeah. And so I find it interesting and wonder if you guys have a take on that. What is, from a political standpoint, obviously you're going to want to rival your opponent, but from what's best for America's standpoint, what the heck?
Yeah. So we've talked a lot about the bill and TikTok, the app, but there are actually two options faced with us if this bill passes Congress and the president signs it. Either it gets banned or it gets sold. And I was wondering if Trump is taking that position, the anti-bill position, as kind of a 4D chess move. Because, everyone says Trump plays 4D chess, so you got to look for the moves sometimes, I guess. So theoretically, I would think it would probably make sense from China's point of view to, if this bill passes, to just say, fine, let it be banned and let the people in America be super duper upset at their politicians and then make stupid choices in the voting booth. I think that might make sense for China. I don't know what Xi Jinping, Winnie the Pooh, is thinking. But that would seem like it makes sense to me. So maybe what Trump is doing is he's saying, no, don't support the bill. And then China's like, if we let it get banned now, then Trump can run on, I was against the bill that banned TikTok, and then everyone will vote for him. And then if China doesn't want Trump to get reelected, they would not want to do that. They wouldn't want to give him that thing to run on. So they'll sell. And so maybe what Trump's doing is actually trying to help the bill be successful. That's the crazy 4D chess move thought I had.
I mean, I wouldn't put it past him. I do think that it's pretty clear that China would prefer a Biden presidency to a Trump presidency. I mean,
that seems just patently obvious to me, but we can't know exactly what
who's the one who decided to put sanctions on or tariffs on Chinese goods and go at China.
Trump.
That's Trump.
Yeah.
He was the only one that's been tough on them in decades.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't think it's a secret who China would prefer. I do think it is an interesting position that they would find themselves in if it were to be signed into law, what the next move would be. I mean, right now, I think they've repeatedly tried to deny that they even have any ownership of this company.
That's the position that even some conservative TikTokers are taking, that it's not even a Chinese company. And I'm like, it is though.
Yeah. Well, they've got
Coven didn't originate in, Wuhan either.
You're right. Yeah.
Isn't there the president, or I don't know what position he has, but he's from Singapore.
Yeah. The CEO is from Singapore.
Yeah, CEO.
And the clip that went viral a few weeks back was, I think Tom Cotton, maybe with somebody else, grilling him on
at the Judiciary Council.
Yeah. Are you a Chinese asset, basically, which he is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But of course, the guy said no, and that was enough for
I'm from Singapore.
TikTokers. See, he's not a Chinese asset. Well, how dare you?
Yeah, you got your talking point.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is interesting, though, because you also have senators like Rand Paul who've come out against it, libertarian.
Mm-hmm.
And he
believes socialism is when the government does stuff.
Pretty much.
And I think he's seeing this as, he's kind of made warnings about how this is like a slippery slope kind of a scenario. I think that's how he's kind of couched it.
And before I read the bill, I was tempted to agree with him.
Yeah. And then after, when you look at the bill itself, that I don't see that within the language of the bill. So I agree with you on that. Yeah. I think part of Trump's position has to do with Trump's overall view of social media and big tech and the abuse that he's experienced from media in general. I mean, nobody can really deny that he's been abused by the media. So he's kind of wrapped this as a bigger, he's trying to expose this or position this as a bigger issue.
As a free speech kind of issue.
Yes. Right. Big tech has a problem with free speech. You're basically scapegoating TikTok because it's connected with China, and you're just going to go after that. And you're doing it, effectively to support, ironically, big tech, your other buddies, because, hey, if TikTok's not in the picture, or if somebody else within the industry that's an American owns TikTok, you get to help kind of set the rules for everything. And, it's what big business has always had the reputation of doing, squashing competition.
Right.
Cronyism.
Yeah. And so here, is that what's happening here? Is this a way to try to say, hey, if we end TikTok that's taken such a potential chunk out of, let's say, Facebook, for example, all the kids these days aren't on Facebook, they're on TikTok. How do we get the kids back on Facebook?
Yeah. I have, I think, compared to y'all, a very cynical view of Congress, definitely compared to you, Thomas.
Yeah.
Where I just don't trust them. And so when I see, most of the Republicans and most of the Democrats agreeing that this is a good thing, as I said earlier, I'm immediately like, oh, hang on, is it though? Mm-hmm. And then you see people like Matt Gaetz and AOC and Marjorie Taylor Greene and Ilhan Omar, they all voted together against this. And so okay, those four are agreeing with one another. Is the world ending? What's happening? But I do think, despite the fact that I think this bill is fine and I have no problem with it, I do think a lot of the members of Congress probably are scapegoating TikTok. They're saying they're supporting this so they can go back and run on and see, I stood up against TikTok and I stood up against social media destroying your kids' lives, when really what they're doing is next to nothing. I think it's mainly something they can point to and say, here, I did it, and have not actually had to spend any resources or do anything difficult at all.
So what problem do you think that they're responding to or solving by this bill? Because that's, I think, any legislation, that's a question we should ask.
Yeah, the actual problem is that China has a clear and open path to gather data on American citizens.
Okay. And manipulate the culture.
Yeah.
I think it's the second one that they're responding to more than the first. I think the first is a bigger
tend to
problem.
Agree, Thomas.
Well, the first is what the bill is allegedly about.
And I think the first is actually the bigger problem. The second is not a not problem, but my concern is that's not a government solvable problem, put it that way. It's when we try to have these big solutions, top-down solutions to social problems, oftentimes it only makes other social problems, newer social problems, or even the one they're supposedly solving, even worse.
Yeah.
Like let's take student loans for college, right? College was expensive. How are we going to solve it so more people can go to college? I know, we'll give them, low interest loans, government backed low interest loans. Yay. Guess what the price of college goes to?
Yeah.
Sky high.
Side tangent. That's what Biden says he wants to do for housing now.
Right. Yeah.
Not going to go down that path, but worth noting.
What's that joke about? I'm from the government and I'm here to help.
Yeah. It's a Reagan joke.
Ronald Reagan. The 5 most terrifying words.
Yeah. I'm from the government and I'm here to help. And then in the past few months, a Biden administration official completely misunderstood the quote and said, sincerely, expecting it to be well received, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. And he was quoting Reagan. He just did not understand the joke.
Context.
I guess it's 9 words.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that part of me, in that, I think that is actually why more people have been on board. We got to do something about TikTok, because I think a lot of people, parents, American citizens in general, are seeing TikTok, and obviously I think mostly they're seeing the extreme examples of TikTok. Like, for example, Libs of TikTok, as she puts all these videos of TikTokers out there, and these TikTokers are whack.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And totally off the rocker.
Right. And so the average American sees this and goes, this is crazy. And they know that their kids maybe on TikTok and watching this stuff, and they're like, how is this influencing my kids? What are this stuff doing? And so there's a sense of like, we need to do something about this social contagion, because that's effectively what they're seeing it as. And this presented an opportunity potentially for Congress to say, hey, we're doing something about it.
Yeah, I think that's almost exactly correct for the reasoning behind supporting this bill for Congress. But I will say that if you are an internet native like me, you know that these people did not just come out of the woodwork as soon as TikTok was around. They've been around for a decade at least. And anyone who was on Tumblr in the early 2010s knows that so much of the DEI woke crazy movement and all the crazy stuff you see on TikTok was forewarned of. There was an omen of it on Tumblr with these people saying these insane things on Tumblr first. That's where a lot of this came from. It probably came from somewhere before Tumblr, but Tumblr's where I first encountered it.
Yeah, Reddit.
So my point is, it's not the social media. It's something else. I think it's largely what people are being taught in schools, or it's the fact that the world is just changing too fast to keep up with, or whatever it is. But I don't think TikTok is actually to blame for most of the things people blame TikTok for, which is why my immediate response to this bill was like, okay.
It's the easy scapegoat because it is the foreign adversary component.
Yeah, I think the bigger, and when we're talking about it, TikTok is just an element of it. It's social media. And what social media effectively has done is, because it's so, there are almost no now they're trying to make themselves gatekeepers, but they're bad gatekeepers.
Mm-hmm.
But with social media, when it arose from the internet, there were no like social gatekeepers in the sense of what was acceptable in polite society. Anybody and any of their crazy ideas could get up there and effectively shout on an equal plane with everybody else.
You're talking about when the internet was first born?
No, when the social media was. It was social media. So social media was able to magnify. If the internet had never developed, well, I can't imagine the internet without social media. But listen, back in the day before social media, you had to search. You could search whatever things you could pop in your head.
We didn't call it that then, but like the original internet was a bunch of users on forums communicating with one another. Okay. That's social media,
right? Okay. Well, with the dawn of MySpace and then Facebook and everything else, where it developed these platforms to allow people to connect en masse and then speak into that. As with, what do we say? When there's a car wreck on the interstate, everybody slows down and rubbernecks, is because it's not something that's nice to look at, but it's something that's, unusual. And you're like, the same thing when you have crazies talking, they're going to get the attention because they're crazy.
Yeah. But
what happens is there's that perverse reward system that comes of that, where people start mimicking it because they're saying, well, there's this desire to be rich and famous. Hey, this guy is doing this, and look what all the popularity they've got. And I think, especially for young folks, that is very attractive and they can be easily manipulated by that, much more so than, older adults who've, been around the block, as it were, and kind of know life better. And so I think that there's this generational kind of rub here, where the older generation's not quite as familiar with the tech, not digital natives. Their kids are digital natives, embrace the tech and run it like they're frogs swimming in a pond. I mean, they've no trouble moving around in it. But what they do lack is the wisdom of just life, to know the smarts to recognize, is this good for me? Is this bad for me? Should I be subjecting myself to this content or not? Mm-hmm. That's the stuff they don't have the wherewithal to know, and they're being influenced. And so this is where I think that rub happens. Parents are like, or people are like, look how this is making and eroding our culture. What do we do about this?
Yeah. I definitely agree that I think a lot of parents and Gen X and boomers feel that way, and millennials are more the younger side. But I would also say that there's another aspect to this, where it's not just that young people are too foolish to know what's good and bad for them. It's that in the days before the internet, there was a cost to get your opinion dispersed.
Too, yeah.
You had to, write a good article to get published in a newspaper. Yeah. You had to, come up with a compelling speech to be able to be on TV or the radio or whatever. And today, all you have to do to publish your internet or your opinion far and wide is have an email account and sign up for whichever social media you want.
Yeah.
That's the only prerequisite now, where before it took time, it took effort, it took linguistic ability. And none of that's a thing anymore. And so I think a large part of it is just that it's so much easier for the crazies and the kooks to get attention now than it ever was. And that's not so much social media's fault as it is just the inevitable result of the technology that developed. And it's not any one person's responsibility. It's just, this is what's happened and we have to figure out how to deal with it, but it's not necessarily good or bad. It's just the new reality.
Yeah. It's the lack of the social gatekeepers before there were well developed, like you would say. They're right in the internet age and with social media, that is something that hasn't fully developed yet. Now we are in the era in which they're trying to develop those. And we're the ones that are frustrated by it because we're saying, you're censoring thoughts that you don't like, not bad thoughts.
Well, and I think they're doing it the wrong way. It's top-down censorship.
Well, with this, you could say maybe potentially.
Well, this bill, again, I have no problem with keeping China.
But who do you mean top-down? By like?
I mean, Facebook trying to come up with a way to censor which thoughts are and are not acceptable, or Twitter even before Elon bought it. They're trying to do it from like the New York Times deciding what can be published, where that's not really how the newspaper system developed. It was, we'll publish what people will read.
Oh, yeah.
And we'll publish what people want to see or what we can sell. And so I think we're starting to get some of these gatekeepers built in. And it's like on Twitter, if you encounter someone who has no profile picture and no followers, you can discard their opinion. If you see someone who has, 100,000 followers, you're like, okay, they've probably got something worth hearing. And so I think we're going to see these new systems develop from the ground up, not the top down. And we just have to be patient and suffer until they take on a form that can constrain the insanity.
Yeah, I guess so. I think it's going to be a little bit of both.
It will be.
It always is. I mean, the New York Times has always had, executive publishers determining what they're going to publish.
Right.
So the battle over, social media is kind of the weird one, because when we talk about the public square, as far as in the physical world, when we go out and talk to people around us and something like that, like you said, if you're out at the mall and you just walk up to somebody and insult them to their face, you might get punched in the face.
Right.
Social media, it's almost like people do it for fun because there's no recourse.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So,
all right. Well, I think we've talked about TikTok. We've talked about social media.
I would maybe expand a little bit, maybe one more element to this. I'm thinking, we are the pop culture contrarians. So the pop culture element of this, we haven't really delved into that as much. I mean, we've kind of
except that TikTok itself is pop culture.
It is. But what I'm wondering is, this is going to impact, if this goes through, if this is passed, and if, let's say you're a content creator on TikTok and it is a way you make a living.
It's like 17 million small businesses that could be impacted by this. Because you're right, Thomas. There is a lot of money to be made by regular people who are just out there putting their ideas and their businesses and their products out into the world and connecting with the other people who want them and like them. And it is really lucrative for a lot of people, regular people.
Interestingly, because creators on TikTok get asked those questions. What are you going to do if it gets banned? How are you going to make money? And a lot of them are saying, I'm going to make more money if TikTok gets banned, because TikTok has the advantage of a huge audience and it's where the people are, but their business practices are not actually that good in terms of how they let you monetize your videos. They take the vast majority compared to places like YouTube or Twitter or whatever. So actually, if the creators can convince their audience to follow them to another platform, they should actually be better off.
Well, if you're talking about ad revenue, more than likely. But in the instance of like affiliate marketing or just selling physical products or building an audience and then bringing them into your own platform and then monetizing it, that's different. And there's no other app currently that lets you build the audience the way TikTok does. You can build an authentic like highly relevant audience fast.
Yeah.
Like 3 months fast.
Yeah. And like, you know, YouTube has their shorts. Is it shorts on YouTube or is it Reels?
Yeah, shorts on YouTube.
Shorts on
Reels
YouTube.
is Instagram /
Facebook.
yeah.
Okay.
Meta.
So they both have kind of their TikTok options, but it's not the same because the algorithm is such a big part of it. The fact that it's a whole app where all you do is look at this one format of video, that's another big part of it. So yeah, it's gonna be a blow to a lot of these creators, but the ones who are already established at least think that they might come out ahead.
Yeah. If they've got a dedicated fan base and they're not looking to scale.
Yeah.
Sure. I can see that. But that's not the small guys who are
Yeah, I mean,
complaining about this.
what about our TikTok channel?
We don't have one currently, do we?
No.
Yeah, maybe we set up an account but never post.
No,
Maybe
we
if
don't.
this goes
Okay.
through and somebody buys it, maybe we do TikTok
yeah.
then.
We'll
Well,
see.
if Elon bought TikTok too, we'd for sure
yeah,
be on there.
we're on there. If Elon can
Actually,
you-
although if Elon bought TikTok, let's be real, it's not going to be a separate app. He's just going to fold it into X.
probably so. X Talk.
X Talk. That sounds really bad.
Yeah. Well, X is terrible. Sorry,
Yeah,
Elon,
yeah.
but it's a terrible name.
It is a terrible name. I'm going to call it Twitter probably forever, and
Yeah.
certainly I'm going to call the individual comments tweets
Yeah.
because that's such a great name.
What are they called?
I don't know.
Posts.
Posts? But that's the generic for anything.
Yeah. Right.
Interesting.
Yeah. The name change wasn't his best idea, but he does like his individual letters as seen in Tesla.
Yeah. And the naming of his
SpaceX.
children.
Yes, XAE 12 something. There's literally a video of him, some reporter asking him about his son named XAE 12, and he's like, "Oh, I thought you were shouting a password at me." Elon says that about his own son.
That poor child.
That poor child. But I think they call the child Ash,
Yeah.
so that's not too bad. Anyhow, that was a tangent. So we've talked about TikTok, we've talked about the bill, we've talked about my cynical view of Congress.
Yes. Indeed.
We talked about what people are worried about on TikTok, why TikTok is a cause of concern, and what the Chinese might be doing with it, what other businesses might be doing with it. And I guess that's all we've got. We think the bill's pretty good upon reading it, but someone who knows
theory.
better might change our mind.
Yeah. Let us know what you think about the bill in the comments. Maybe we're totally off base.
All right. This has been the Pop Culture Contrarian, brought to you by the Patriot Post, which is the oldest conservative news digest on the web. It's right and it's free. Be sure to like and subscribe. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.